Hello, these are going to be the notes on the succession, uh, ecological succession, and this is what happens when there is a drastic change, like a major forest fire, or a lava flow, or a flood. What happens to an ecosystem that's already developed when this big change happens? And so we're going to start with this video. Hopefully, the sound will come through.
Sometimes ecosystems are destroyed by fires, floods, volcanoes, or even human disturbances. But these ecosystems can return. The gradual, sequential regrowth of a community of species in an area is called ecological succession. There are two recognized types of succession, primary and secondary. Primary succession is the development of a community in an area that has not supported life previously. Examples include bare rock, a sand dune, or an island that's formed by a volcanic eruption. Secondary succession is the sequential replacement of species that follows disruption of an existing community. The disruption may stem from a natural disturbance, such as the forest fire or a strong storm, or from human activity, such as farming, logging, or mining. Let's look at the stages of succession and how to replace or start a community. First, you have a pioneer species, which are organisms that predominate early in succession. These species are usually small and grow and reproduce quickly, like moss, lichen, algae, or grasses. Then, larger shrubs and even trees will make their way into the area. And finally, a climax community is reached, which is the stable endpoint of succession, which lasts for a long time. Climax communities are recognized by large, old trees. Thanks for watching this episode of Teacher's Pet. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow me on Twitter @SciencePet.
All right, you do not have to like and subscribe if you don't want to, although it is fairly informative. All right, so that's just a brief overview of secondary succession. Okay. At the end of these notes, we should know how to define ecological succession. We should be able to explain what primary succession and secondary succession are, and we should be able to. We're going to skip over Climax Community. It's fairly theoretical because, in theory, your ecosystem keeps getting better and better and more stable, but there's always going to be some forest fire or flood or something that is going to affect your ecosystem. Vocabulary: climax community, ecological succession, pioneer species, primary succession, and secondary succession. So those are our vocab and objectives. Again, if you didn't already do it, ecological succession are our that's the title. This is under ecology. We're still in the ecology unit, but this is a new section of the chapter, so to speak. Okay. So the change in an ecosystem over time is called ecological succession. It's how the ecosystem changes over a long period of time. For example, how a forest over thousands of years might become a desert, or a desert might become a forest over a very long time. Or once a volcano erupts and a forest is covered in lava and everything is dead, there's nothing but hardened, solidified rock. And how does that become a forest again over the course of time? That's what we're talking about. There's two types, primary and secondary, as we've already said. Primary succession occurs when there is no soil. So we are starting off with rock. Now, it might be rock that's been there for thousands of years or millions of years. It might be rock that oozed out of a volcano as lava and then cooled and solidified and became solid rock. Okay, landslides over land, glacier retreats. So remember, glaciers are those frozen rivers of ice. And so as they start to melt, we call that retreating. And because it looks like they're going backwards, they're really not, but it kind of looks that way if you could watch it over a long period of time. Lava flows harden. So these are things that cover up or destroy the soil. And so there's no soil left, and so primary succession is going to happen. The first species to show up is called a pioneer species because there's no other species there. There's no soil, there's no plants, there's no weeds. Okay, it's just rock. And so these are going to be species that can live on bare rock. It's not going to be a tree or a plant because they have to have roots that go into the soil and they can't grow into a rock. Usually these are going to be bacteria or lichen. A lichen is a fungus that has an algae living inside of it. The algae provides food through photosynthesis for the lichen. The lichen provides a safe environment for the algae. So guess what? What kind of relationship is that? The algae benefits and the lichen benefit. Go on. Think about it. Right. It's a symbiotic relation. But what kind of symbiosis? There are three kinds of symbiosis: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Okay? They both benefit mutually, so you are correct. It's mutualism. Right? Okay. And as I always like to say, everybody likens me because I'm such a fun guy. Ology later. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Let's see. Pioneer species help break down the rock. Lichens, especially, and the bacteria too, they produce some acids. And those acids help break down the rock. And as the rock breaks down and old algae or old lichen die, soil starts to form. And once you have soil, you can start having some plants. And once you have plants, you have more mechanical weathering. As the roots grow, you have more soil form, and then you get bigger and bigger plants. Okay. As organic matter increases in the new soil, shrubs and trees can start to grow. All right, secondary succession. This occurs when there is soil. So we're not saying that primary succession happens and then secondary succession. They're two separate things. Primary just means there's no soil. No soil. Secondary, there is soil. Okay? So this might happen after a really, bad forest fire. Well, all forest fires are bad. Or a bad flood that wipes out a forest, especially if it was, say, ocean water, where the salt water would kill the plants. Okay, human actions like farming. Humans come along, they clear the trees, run off the wildlife, they till the land, they farm it, and then let's say the farmer loses the farm, and it's just left there for decades. Then secondary succession is going to start taking off because there is soil. So this is going to happen faster because we don't have to wait, for decades, maybe even hundreds of years for soil to start forming. It's already there. Right? Secondary succession is faster because it has that head start of having soil. Grasses are probably already there, and then you get trees, and then you get shrubs and trees and forest plants, and then you get animals, so forth and so on. Okay? Now, this is not exactly an animation, but it's going to kind of look like one. But this is primary succession. So we start with bare rock. Okay? And then, in that same area, we start getting some pioneer species, maybe some mollusks, some lichens, some bacteria, okay? And they're going to start living and growing, and waste products that they make are going to start breaking down that bare rock, okay? As they grow and live and die, there's going to be decomposition, and that's going to create your topsoil. Okay? And in that topsoil, you're going to get some pioneer species like grass, the secondary species like grasses and stuff. And then you might get some small shrubs growing with the grass. And then eventually you might get some trees. Okay? So that's primary succession. And notice how I made this chart specifically, or I made this presentation so that you could see that we're talking about this happening in one area. Okay. Now it might be a very small area affected by a farmer, or maybe not a farmer, but like a lava flow or something, or it could be a very large area. But it's one area. Okay. Everything's happening in that one area. Secondary succession, we start with an established community. Okay? We've got soil, we've got trees and shrubs and all that. Something bad happens. Okay? It kills the trees, it kills the shrubs, it kills the grass. Okay? So now the living things are removed from the soil, but the soil is still there. And since we have soil, in a relatively very short period of time, we start having grasses and shrubs, and then we have trees. Okay? And so that's that. That's secondary succession. So basically, the takeaway for me that I want you to know is that there is a kind of a process to the way an ecosystem recovers from a disaster. And then after that, I would like for you to know that primary is when there's no soil, and secondary is when there's soil. So, okay. I'm gonna let you watch Amoeba Sisters on your own. I'll probably post a link to the Amoeba Sister video with the link to these notes. Okay. Study jams, again, that's something you can look up. And then Climax Community is just a theoretically very stable ecosystem that's existed for a very long time. It can happen, but it's not likely to exist forever because eventually something's going to happen. There'll be a lightning strike that causes a forest fire, or there'll be a hurricane or an earthquake. Something will happen that disrupts that ecosystem. Okay? And then that is going to bring us, this is just a summary of everything we just talked about, so we don't need to copy that. This is just an example. We don't really need to do that either. All right, so one thing I want to point out here, this is an activity that I do in class, and this is the kind of diagram they always put in textbooks. And what I want you to realize is it's not, we start over on the left and then that stays moss, and then, 100 years later you have trees a mile away. That's not what we're talking about. And I think sometimes the diagram confuses people. What we're saying is in this spot, okay, where's my laser pointer? All right, laser pointer. All right, so we're talking about in this spot, you're going to have some mosses and stuff. And then you're going to have some shrubs, and then you're going to have some trees, and then you're going to have bigger trees, and you're going to have your hardwoods and your pines and all that stuff. Okay, it's all happening in the same area. But it's hard to show it that way on a flat piece of paper. So they draw a diagram like this. That's why on those previous slides, I had the pictures stacked on top of each other. All right. And next class, we're going to get into climate change and some environmental issues. And you're going to start seeing some of those in your CK12 attendance assignments. Please remember, attendance assignments are grades. Doing them late will get you the grade, but you only get attendance if you complete it on the attendance day. Okay? All right. That's it for these notes. Have a good day and make sure you finish your classwork. Stay curious.